Hello and welcome to our lesson for today. If you would please make sure that you have a page to take notes, that would be great. If you do not, you need to get somewhere to take notes right now, as I will be checking those notes before you can get your homework assignment for today. So, today our objective is that mathematicians will be able to solve equations and inequalities involving absolute value. So the first piece, one of the most important pieces here to help us as we get started, is this piece of essential understanding. You can solve absolute value equations and inequalities by first isolating the absolute value expression if necessary. So first, isolating that absolute value expression is key. If you do not do that first, you are going to have issues as you continue. Once you do that, then write an equivalent pair of linear equations or inequalities. And you will see examples of what that looks like here and why we have to write a pair as we continue in our lesson. So if you have that question, keep it in your mind and see if this lesson answers that question. Okay? For the first one, solving an absolute value equation. When I solve an absolute value equation, like mentioned in the essential understanding just a moment ago, the first thing that I need to do is isolate the absolute value. So, if this is my absolute value expression, I need to isolate that, or it needs to be by itself. So in order to do that, I need to subtract 2 from both sides, and I end up with the absolute value of x equals 7. Well, I know that absolute value means the distance away from 0. The value inside of the absolute value symbols can be positive or negative, but my answer is always positive. So I need to think, okay, what numbers could be in the absolute value symbols that would have an answer of 7? 7 spaces away from 0 on the number line. And that would be the numbers positive 7 and negative 7. One of the ways I can visualize that is by writing this pair of expressions, or equations, I apologize. So my solution for this first inequality is x is equal to 7 and negative 7. In this specific problem, you will notice that the answer is the same number, but just both positive and negative. However, I do want to warn you or caution you, that is not always the case. So do not assume that you should have the same number for both of your answers. So watch out for that. At this time, please take a look at the question that you see on the screen, pause your video, and when you are ready to check your answer, press play. Hello and welcome back. On the Got It questions today, I will not be showing any work. I will simply be stating the answer, and if you cannot figure out why your answer is wrong, if it was, then you need to raise your hand and ask for help. In this specific Got It question, our answers are n is 3 or negative 3. All right, so you'll notice here we've got a key concept, an important piece that we need to take note of. To solve an equation in the form of the absolute value of a is equal to b, where a represents a variable expression and b is greater than 0, solve a equals b and a equals negative b. Some important things that I want to point out about that. It says that in that expression, b must be larger than 0. We cannot have the absolute value of a number equal a negative number. That is not possible for absolute value. That would be a no solution problem, because the thinking behind absolute value is that it's the distance away from 0, and you cannot have a negative distance. So therefore, it has to be larger than 0. It cannot be a negative number. When you find that you have a number that's larger than 0, you then need to solve 2 separate equations, and you'll notice it lists those here. You need to solve a, so whatever's in your absolute value, equal to the positive value that you originally had, as well as a is equal to the negative value from what was in your absolute value symbols. So A is equal to B, and A is equal to negative B. The negative value opposite the absolute value. Let's take a look here. Problem number 2. Starting from 100 feet away, your friend skates towards you and then passes by you. She skates at a constant speed of 20 feet per second. Her distance, d, from you in feet after t seconds is given by the equation d equals the absolute value of 100 minus 20t. At what times is she 40 feet from you? So as I take a look at this problem, it gives me the absolute value equation already. D is equal to absolute value of 100 minus 20t. And I know that I am trying to find the times, which is why I have that variable of t. I also see that it says I'm looking for the time when she is 40 feet from me. And so 40 feet is a distance, so I'm going to substitute that in for the letter D here. And then I'm going to solve my absolute value equation. The first thing I need to do is isolate the absolute value symbols. Well, my absolute value symbols are isolated. There's nothing else on that side of the equation, so I am good to go with that. At this time is where I write the pair of equations where I set 1 to the positive value and 1 to the negative value. So 40 is equal to 100 minus 20t, and negative 40 is equal to 100 minus 20t. I'm not changing the expression from within my absolute value symbols. I'm simply making the opposite side both positive and negative to get my two values that would fit. Solve them just like an equation. Subtract 100 from both sides, and I get 40 minus 100, which is negative 60. At this point, I divide by negative 20. And for the first one here, I have t is equal to 3. There is one answer. For my second one, I subtract 100, and get negative 140 is equal to negative 20t. When I divide by negative 20, I end up with t is equal to 7. So this is an example of where when I solve an absolute value symbol, sometimes I have the same value and sometimes I have two different values. This is an example of two different values. Now, to think about what that really means for this real life situation. My friend is skating towards me, is at the same place as me for a split second, and continues skating past me. So therefore, she is 40 feet away from me at two different times, which is why we end up having the two answers for this problem. All right, please take a moment. We've got a new real-world situation here. Please pause the video, give it a try, and when you are ready to check your answer, please press play. All right, welcome back. The answer for this got it question: at what time is she 60 feet away from you? My two values for t should be at 4 seconds and at 28 seconds. If you did not get those values, please pause your video again. Please double check your work. And if you still don't know how I got to these two answers, please raise your hand and ask a question. Let's take a look at problem number 3. Now notice in the title of this slide, it does say that we're going to have an absolute value equation with no solution, but we need to make sure that we understand what's going on here. When I'm looking at this absolute value equation, I remember from the very beginning of my video that the one piece of essential understanding that is key to understanding absolute value is knowing that I first have to isolate the absolute value expression. So when I look at this and I see my absolute value expression right here, but that it has other things with it as well, it is not isolated. So I need to isolate that first. So I would isolate that just as if it were its own variable. Subtract 12 from both sides. These cancel out, and I have 3 absolute value 2z plus 9 is equal to negative 2. Now, absolute value symbols are not parentheses, so do not distribute. Divide by 3, because this is multiplication. Now, you'll notice here that I have the absolute value of 2z plus 9 is equal to negative 2/3. At this point in my problem, I should be pausing and realizing that I have absolute value is equal to a negative number on the right-hand side here. And that is why this is no solution. When you have absolute value, remember absolute value, the meaning of it is the distance from 0. So when I have the absolute value here, my absolute value answer cannot be a negative number because it cannot be a negative distance from 0 on a number line. Okay? Please take a moment and check out this equation, this absolute value equation, to see if it is another no solution or to see if it has two answers. When you are ready to check your work, please press play to come on back and check your work. Hello and welcome back. Take a look at this got it question. The answer to this question is once again no solution. We cannot have a negative value once the absolute value is isolated. If you do not understand how we got that, please check your work or raise your hand and ask a question. So, when we transition this thinking then into inequalities, to solve an inequality where we have the absolute value is less than b, we are going to take the inequality and create a compound inequality. Negative b is less than a is less than positive b. So when we have the absolute value is less than, we're going to create a compound inequality. When we have absolute value is greater than b, where b is still greater than 0 in both of these here, we are going to create a compound inequality with the word or, where a is less than negative b or a is greater than b. Okay? The same rules or similar rules are true if you have the or equal to sign. So let's take a look at what this looks like here. For problem number 4, the absolute value of 8n is greater than or equal to 24. Well, when I have absolute value is greater than, I need to create an or compound inequality. So I am going to have 8n is less than or equal to negative 24. And I'm also going to have 8n is greater than or equal to 24. When I do this, once again, creating a compound inequality with the word or, but notice that the symbol, the inequality symbol is reversed with the negative. A way that you can kind of keep track of that or keep that in your mind is thinking about when I have a negative, I'm multiplying and dividing by a negative, I flip that symbol, so that can be just a small connection point if you're struggling to remember when to flip it. So then I solve just like I would. N is less than or equal to negative 3, or divide by 8, n is greater than or equal to positive 3. So what I have here is my number line. Sorry, it got a little bit non-proportional there as I ran out of space. My values for n can be less than negative 3 or equal to, or greater than or equal to positive 3. So that's what that would look like there. All right, please take a moment, pause your video, and see if you can get this question correct. If you do not, once again, pause your video and check the answer with me. Our answer for this got it question is that x is greater than or equal to 0.5, or x is less than or equal to negative 4.5. So there we go. The last chunk that we need to take care of today is solving an absolute value inequality from a word problem. Company makes boxes of crackers that should weigh 213 grams. A quality control inspector randomly selects boxes to weigh. Any box that varies from the weight by more than 5 grams is sent back. What is the range of allowable weights for the box of crackers? So the one thing that I want to point out here, when it says that the weight cannot be off by more than 5 grams, the reason I can know this is an absolute value is because it can be plus 5 grams or minus 5 grams, because that would be 5 grams off either direction from the desired weight. So I'm going to continue on here knowing that it is an inequality. So I need to be thinking about the difference between the actual weights is at most 5 grams. If I talk about the weight in grams being my variable, I would solve the difference between the actual and the weight, W minus 213, because that is what my box should weigh, is at most or is no more than 5. And here I have my inequality. Now again, because I have a compound inequality coming up here, I need to think about which way my symbols are facing and what that tells me about how to write my compound. This is going to be a compound as if it was an and statement. So my inequality becomes negative 5 is less than or equal to W minus 213 is less than or equal to positive 5. And when I add 213 then to all of my pieces of my, all the pieces of my inequality, I end up with 208 is my smaller value and 218 is my larger value. So my allowable weights for my boxes of crackers are between 208 and 218. All right, one last got it question. Please pause, try it out. I will put the answer on here for when you resume, and if once again you do not get it, please double check, ask a question, make sure you understand. The answer to this got it question should be 31.95 is less than or equal to W is less than or equal to 32.05. So if you did not get that or do not understand how that was figured out here, please raise your hand and ask a question. At this time, this is the end of our lesson, so please show me your notes so that you can get your homework assignment.